And it's a battle of the behemoths with tech giants Facebook and Amazon going head-to-head. CEOs Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg have traded insults over the years, but now it's actually on the record with an official company statement from Facebook advising employees not to use Apple products. The statement reads, Tim Cook has consistently criticised our business model. We've long encouraged our employees and executives to use Android because it's the most popular operating system in the world.
Yeah, it's an amazing and very public dispute between two of the world's biggest companies, and it's our starting point tonight for our Taking Stock panel chat. We're joined by Warren Mundine, host of Mundine Means Business on Sky, and corporate communications expert Greg Baxter from Newgate Communications. Thanks so much to both of you for being here.
Welcome to you.
Communications expert Greg, I might start with you on this, because is this a case study in how not to communicate with each other if you're two of the world's biggest tech companies?
Well, I think there's two or three things. You know, one, Apple fighting with Facebook is like Coke fighting with Pepsi. Who cares? Secondly, I mean, Apple is an enabler of Facebook. So I find the whole thing extraordinarily hypocritical. And thirdly, and I've banged on about this on this show before, I just wish they were paying tax.
Yeah, well,
especially in Australia.
That's a decent point. I mean, absolutely. Warren, they literally go hand in hand, quite literally, Apple and Facebook in your hand. I mean, are you surprised to see all this?
Look, it just shows that these two blokes have got too much time on their hand, and it is bizarre to see them. It's not two little spoiled rich boys punching it out, and the rest of the country, the rest of the world, are just sitting there going, "Oh, this is entertaining." Yeah.
I mean, what needs to be done to you know, there's been so many problems, I guess, that have been faced, haven't they, with Facebook? It's been under a lot of scrutiny, under a lot of hot water at the moment. Does it come down to management and the leadership of Mark Zuckerberg?
I think it does. It does. The scary part about the whole thing is that you know, Facebook and Twitter and a number of other accounts hold so much information about you, personal information and that, and they just carry on like they're a bunch of spoiled kids with their toys, and they're like a couple of dictators. I just find the whole thing a bit of a joke, and I think it's fun. We can poke fun at Mark Zuckerberg. He he deserves it, and I think they need to look. My advice is to their parents is I think they just need to go and see their sons and probably give them a bit of a spanking and tell them to wake up to themselves.
Well, it's interesting. We do poke fun at them, but Facebook's a pretty young company, and this seems like a pretty juvenile thing to go on the record with. You know, you started it, all this sort of stuff.
Got the punching gloves out.
Well, exactly, right? I mean, Greg, can you imagine like a GE or a Ford carrying on this way?
Well, you can, but I think the problem with these companies, Facebook in particular, a young company, as you say, but it's exhibiting all of the characteristics of old companies. It's lost the sense of accountability. And we've seen that through those congressional hearings, I think, in the US, where Zuckerberg had to appear and answer a whole lot of questions about privacy and a range of other things to do with the Cambridge Analytica problem. Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, others, I mean, they are just simply not publicly accountable for the businesses that they run, that they've made billions of dollars from. And I think that we're going to see a decline in trust for these organisations quite quickly, and we've seen quite a rapid or a significant impact on the share prices of these tech stocks, because younger people are waking up to the fact that some of their corporate values are just as bad as some of the establishment companies.
Speaking of companies that had a rough day at the office, executives more specifically. NAB, Leanne,
Yeah, exactly. Big pay cut there for Andrew Thorburn, $2 million. But you just wonder if it's really come as any surprise in the wake of the Royal Commission scandals.
I wish I was earning enough money to get a $2 million pay cut.
Well, that's it. Even after that, I think he's got a pretty whopping pay package there. I think he's still at about 4.3 million or so.
We saw this a few years ago with the global financial crisis, with Nicholas Moore, when he took a massive pay cut. And look, we've got to make these executives, these CEOs of companies and that in their senior management more accountable in these areas. The big problems we're seeing in us, and I see it in the banking system, is bonuses. They seem to get all these massive bonuses, so it doesn't actually you know, look at productivity and actually the client, the customer, and looking after the customer. So there's a lot of work that's got to be done in this area. So I'm not surprised he got his pay cut. But you know, if the bank's looking for what they're going to do with that money, I can give them a bank account. It's great.
Me too.
Yeah, time to give
Put half into mine.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's really encouraging. I mean, the banks obviously have come in for a lot of flack in the last few years. But NAB is now the second bank after Commonwealth where the bonus or the variable pay reduction for executives and staff is over $100 million at both those organisations. So I think people are saying, well, you know, that there should be consequences, there should be accountability. Well, you know, $100 million at each of those organisations, I think, starts to talk to that pretty powerfully, and I think that's a really good sign.
So with all the Royal Commission stuff going on, as it has been all year, did you see any other way forward for these executives? Was there any situation where they weren't going to be having huge chunks carved out of their final pay? I mean, purely from a PR perspective.
No, I mean, I think they have to be accountable. And I think that certainly Commonwealth Bank and NAB today, I think, are demonstrating that they're taking the accountability very seriously, and they're completely overhauling their remuneration frameworks so that this sort of thing will keep happening. And that's what the community and what customers expect to happen if they're not looking after the interests of their customers or their shareholders.
Yeah. Warren, what about the idea that you need to pay top dollar, you need to pay these top executives the highest dollars in order to get that quality, you know, that management?
Well, we are in a global marketplace, so you're competing against, you know, the global market. You're not competing against people in the United States and Europe and stuff like that. But it has to be focused and realistic. It's got to be about, you know, as Greg said, it's got to be about the shareholder and the customer. That's what it's all about. These people have seen in these big corporations, and it's not only the banks, they seem to have lost what the aim of business is. The business is out there having a product that services the customer, and the customer is number one.
Big salaries are not, in my view, the problem per se.
Yeah.
A big salary when you are not delivering for customers or for shareholders, or preferably having those two in balance, that's a problem. And of course the other thing that people are very angry about is a CEO who hasn't done the job well leaves with a golden handshake that's enormous, obscenely enormous, right? People resent that quite rightly because they're leaving because they haven't done the job. So I think it's not so much the quantum of the salary, it's actually what you deliver in exchange for it.
So big salary is okay then if you are delivering?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with salaries either. It is about the deliverable. You know, are you delivering? Are you growing the customer base? You're growing the business. You're doing these things. Look, I've always had a question mark about some of these huge bonuses and that in this area. But look, you know, as I said, you're in a global marketplace. You've got to pick up good people. Well, you know, the other thing that people are wild about, they're not too sure they picked up the best people that's delivering for them.
Yeah.
Speaking about accountability and corporate punishment, let's talk cricket. Because
I'll leave you guys to it.
Yeah, let's just get straight into it. Because cricket has been this area of punishment lately, right? So Steve Smith, the reason we're talking about cricket tonight is that Steve Smith has been dealt another blow. He went to sign up to this new T20 league in the UAE T20X, and the whole thing fell over before it even started. So, I mean, it continues to rain on poor old Steve Smith there. I mean, let's come back to this question of, has he been hard done by? There's been a few people out there who said, well, no, he doesn't need to serve all this extra time. Bring him back, let him play the summer of cricket. Greg, what do you think? Well,
I just think that is so misguided. I mean, he and others did a very bad thing. Now, they got a very harsh punishment. But they got a harsh punishment because it was a very bad thing that upset almost the entire country, including people who don't follow cricket. True. It went right against what I think we regard as the sort of values that we live by, the values of fair play and the fair go and all of those. I mean, to say now, oh, he served 7 or 8 months or whatever it is, and I mean, I just think that's a nonsense. I think he will come back at the end of the 12 months or whatever it is. He will redeem himself with and re-earn the great respect of the Australian people, I think, because he is a champion. But let's not you know, shilly-shally around the punishment here. I mean, this was a terrible terrible misjudgment by him and by the other players in the team that were involved, and it was terribly misjudged by Cricket Australia, as we know, and we've now seen some of the consequences of that flowing, which I think are quite appropriate.
A lot of fallout.
What do you think, Warren?
Well, look, just on the smart meter, they should have got 12 months anyway. Who thinks that they can be on TV with about 1 million cameras around the place doing things? You know?
I don't understand how they thought they would get away with it.
No, it's just totally bizarre. And look, I agree. He is a great guy, but not that smart when it comes to cheating, and shouldn't be. And they deserved what they got, and they just should be serving their time.
Do you think that what happened shows that he mightn't have been prepared for the role of captain? He was still a pretty young guy, he still is. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility. Do you think that that's what showed? Well,
that's what that report showed about the culture, you know, that it's, you know, you're having him in there young and then being actually influenced by that culture that made him think, oh, well, you know, to win this game we have to do this and have to do that, you know, and fiddle with the ball and everything like that. That just shows you the bad culture of the place. Now, I do have a bit of sympathy in that regard to him, but, you know, that they got caught.
I think that's right. I mean, he was left to... He should never have been put in the position of actually running that press conference. And David Peever, I think, was already on the plane when that press conference took place. I mean, Warren's right. I mean, and as we've seen from that report, the culture in Cricket Australia was appalling. So I think he was... I wouldn't say he was too young to be captain. I think he was in an organisation that didn't provide the leadership that he had a right to expect, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about that from a kind of a communications perspective there from the press conference, because everybody was very, very angry, and then they saw him so deflated and so upset. I mean, did you kind of see that as a pretty decent way to present yourself after that event? Well,
there's no question that he was incredibly sorry for what had happened, and he was prepared to be accountable for what had happened and be responsible for what had happened, and to say, you know, I'm on the path to atonement here. And I think, you know, subtly expecting a right to be taken seriously in that sense, and I think most people do. That's why he should serve the 12 months, and then he comes back and it's done.
Yeah. Look, I reckon he'll come back, and he is a champion player. That experience will make him a lot better, and with the changes at Cricket Australia, that will hopefully change that culture, that really bad culture that's there. And it is a dreadful culture when you think about what the game of cricket mean to us. Like, we're probably only second to India in the subcontinent in regard to our love of the game. It's every kid has a story about when they was at school, you know, in the nets whacking away thinking there's going to be a Don Bradman. And that's why the public took it so serious.
I never thought that. About him or me.
Can we switch topics very quickly? We're being told to wrap, but I do want to get to this one because it's so interesting. It's about fighting over your finances. There's been some new research saying that 1 in 3 couples argue at least once a month over their financial affairs. The first thing that actually came to mind was once a month. That's actually putting it pretty mildly.
Yeah, that's true.
What do you think, Greg? I mean, did this come as any surprise to you?
Well, once you're through that initial flush of passion, relationships become very transactional, and so this becomes a really important part of a relationship. And as someone very wisely, much younger than me, said today, you need to have flexibility with money management, but it needs to be agreed, and you need to have generosity, and that needs to be reciprocal. And I thought, you've absolutely nailed that. Right?
That's wise.
Really good way of putting it.
It's interesting too about the comments in the report that it's going back to our grandparents' days. You know, we've got he may be as ugly as sin, but at least he's got money, so I might go for that.
And good money management, you know, not kind of blowing it all on a new set of golf clubs.
No, I wasn't.
Exactly.
Point that you there, Greg. I was actually generically going.
All right, great. We are going to have to leave it there. Warren Mundine, look forward to your show 5 p.m. on Sunday on Sky. And Greg Baxter, thank you as always for coming in. Much appreciated. Well,
thank you.